Hello, I'm Christine from House of Smocking, and in this video I'm going to show you how to do the stitches for the Ready to Smock bib. This is what it will look like when it's finished, and in the kit you get a pre-pleated bib with lace edge, your thread, a crewel needle and the instructions along with a graph for the smocking design. For the first row of the bib we're doing a straightforward cable stitch. Now unusually we wouldn't normally smock on the first row, that would be a holding row, but because this is a ready-made bib we're going to smock on the first row. So for a cable stitch we're using 3 threads from the stranded DMC thread supplied. So we start with an up cable, which means your thread is up above the needle, and we pick up the next pleat along, keeping your needle parallel to the pleater thread and just below the pleater thread. And then the thread is now coming out at the bottom of my stitch, and we pick up the next pleat along, again keeping your needle parallel, and we pull the thread up in the direction it's going, and that creates our down cable. Our thread is back up again. We pick up the next pleat and pulling your thread down in the direction it's going, and we have an up cable. And again you'll notice that the thread alternates from being above and below the needle, and you just continue to the end in this fashion with an up and a down cable, like so. Okay. When you get to the end of the row you want to put your needle down and behind your last stitch, so that when you pull your needle through you can't see where it finishes off, and then we tie off on the back on the last pleat. And that's your first cable row. For the next row we're going to start on row 2 1/4. So that's just so that the pattern works out. You'll find that in the pack the bib has a mark for marking the centre, so if you wanted you could work from the centre outwards, so that would centre your design. But I have counted the pleats, and if you start with the stitch with just on 2 1/4 and then work up to your cable stitch, it will mean that you will have your centre stitch correct. So this one I'm going to do a combination stitch, and as I mentioned, for the pattern to work out so it's centred nicely for the bib, and we're starting at row 2 1/4. So my thread has come out on the left hand side of the first pleat, and I'm going to pick up the next pleat just below the pleater thread. And I'm going to leave my thread up because I want to create an up cable. So I pick up my next pleat, again just below the pleater thread for my up cable. Threads down, and the combination is 3 cables, a 2-step wave and 3 cables. So there's my 3 cables. My thread is coming out at the bottom of the stitch, so that is the direction I can go next. But because I'm going down, I'm going to move my thread up. I'm going to pick up the stitch at 1/4 space down, or a halfway between the half space threads. Then I'm going to put my thread back up again because I'm going down to the next pleater thread. So that's my 2-stepped wave. So I've come from the cable, that's 1 step, 2 step, and I'm now down to the pleater thread, which is a half space below. So I go across because I want now 1 cable, and then I'm going to put my thread down because I'm travelling up, and I'm going to do 1 step, and 2-step, which is back up just to below the pleater thread, in line with my 3 cables. So I want an up cable next, so I leave my thread up and I pick up the next stitch, the next pleat, sorry. That's 1 cable, 2 cables, 3 cables. Then I'm going to travel down so my thread goes up, and I'm going to pick up the next pleat along. So you can either say it's a 1/4 space from there to there, or a 1/2 space from that pleater there to that pleater thread. But that's 1 step of my wave, and the 2nd step of my 2-step wave. And then I do my 1 cable, thread down to travel up, and again picking up halfway between those 2 pleater threads, thread down again to travel up to the pleater thread, and then I leave my thread up because I'm going to do an up cable, another cable, and my 3rd cable. Thread up to do my 2-step wave, so that's 1 step, thread up again because I'm still travelling down, and I'm keeping my needle parallel to the pleater threads at all times. That's the 2nd step, so my thread is down, ready for me to do my down cable, and that's my single cable. Thread down because I'm going to travel up, 1 step, 2-step, and then I'm ready to do my 3 cables again. Thread up because I'm going to be travelling down for my 2-step wave. 1, 2, and you'll notice that I'm just keeping either just, in this case, above the pleater thread so that my stitch sits on the pleater thread, and then when I do my 2-step wave I go up to there and then just below that pleater thread so that my stitch sits just on the pleater thread. And I'm doing that because I don't want to take up any space from the next row. So when I do my mirror image, so I'm going from there down, across, and then up again, the next row is the same size or distance from there to there as the first row. One step, 2 step. So if you remember that if you're travelling, you alternate your threads. So if you're travelling, I'm going across now. So if I'm going across a row, then my thread, because it's a cable stitch, will land where it's supposed to. But if I want to travel either up or down, then my thread needs to be in the opposite direction. So I'm going to travel down now, so I put my thread up out of the way and I pick up my next pleat. I'm still travelling down, so I put my thread up again and pick up my stitch. And now, because I'm doing a cable, I leave my thread where it is and I'm doing my cable. For the second row, I've tied off and just come through a 1/4 space from that thread. So I'm going to do a mirror image of this row. So I put my thread up because I want to pick up the next pleated thread just above, or the pleat just above the next pleater thread. Okay. So I now want 3 cables. So I pick up my next pleat, do a cable, another cable, and again another cable. Then because I'm travelling, I'm going to put my thread down, and I'm going to be halfway from that pleater thread to that cable with my needle, and again keeping it parallel. Always keep your needle parallel. Thread down because I'm still travelling, and then we want to match our cable just next to it. Then because I'm going to do a cable, I leave my thread where it lands. And I do my cable. So I'm now travelling down, so I put my thread up. That's my first step of my 2-step wave, which was halfway between the cable and that pleater thread. Thread up again because I'm still travelling, and I pick up the next pleat. And I do my 3 cables. That's 1, 2, 3. Now I'm travelling upwards, so I want my thread down. I'm going to be halfway between that pleater thread and the cable. I pick up the next pleat, thread down because I'm still travelling, and again just picking up the pleat to match the cable. So I want my needle to be a needle width away from that stitch. If you think of your needle being the middle of your 3 threads, so you're going to have a thread sitting just above your needle and the other one just below. That way you don't get your stitches sitting on top of each other. So still travelling down this time, so my thread is up, pick up the next stitch, pleat along, thread up again, and we carry on like that to the end of the row. So here we have our second row complete. Now I'm just working on a little sample here, and for the eagle eyes ones of you, you'll have noticed I did have a mistake on my first row, so I've put that right. So that's my first row and second row completed. So for the next row, on the actual bib, what you've got to do is you've got to count back to here. So if this is your centre, so you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you start with 3 cables as a mirror image on there against the second row. And then you go from 3 cables to 1 cable, 3 to 1, as you have done before, for the same distance past centre as you have here. So again you'd count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to finish off. And then the next row, you would count 1, 2, 3 and a half, and you start with your cable there, so your single cable down to your 3 cables, up and down, and then up to 1, 2, 3 there. And then your last one would be just 1 either side of the centre one to finish off here, and then the last one for your point. So there is a graph in the kit to be able to see where the stitches are to be placed. I have used this combination stitch of the cable and the 1 cable and 3 cable with a 2-step wave in between combination on this bonnet as well. Both of these are available as a kit on houseofsmocking.co.uk. Thank you.